Hello and welcome to the 8th React Native Community Kraków. I'm once again Kasper, still Kasper, and I work as a software engineer here in Software Mention in a React Native open source team. In today's meetup, there will be two talks. Will be by Piotrek and Łukasz. They are from Software Mention. It will be about modern Expo and how Expo supports custom native code. Second one will be concluded by Piotr from Miquido. This talk will be about React Native and Monorepositories. Yeah. I'd like to have one more information. We are looking for speakers for the next meetups, so if you have anything, you could maybe take part of it. Let us know if you have something to show. Keep in mind that something that's useful for you, but too easy maybe or too boring, can be very interesting to other people. Yeah. Last meetup was about 2 months ago, and we have that transition with our meetups that we create a short intro that we conclude what's new and interesting in React Native since the last meetup. So I've gathered a bunch of tweets and blog posts that I think will be interesting for you. So the first one is from William Candelion with this clickbaity title. It's Flutter, but in React Native. He created a small storm within a React Native community, but why? So there are parts of React Native that aren't the easiest to work with. For example, animations. You could maybe use for that a solution created by third party, not coming from Facebook. So for example, React Native Reanimated. For example, as well, gestures aren't the easiest to work with. So you could maybe give React Native gesture handler a try. But what about shadows, gradients, and blurs? You're screwed. Like, you can use SVGs maybe to rasterize them. That's not very performant, not very great, but that's a solution. But this guy thought, like, what we do if we expose Skia views to React Native? Skia is a rendering engine used by Google Chrome, by Android canvases, and by Flutter, hence the title of it. And the results are quite promising, quite great. It looks good, and it's from React Native. Code for that is yet to be open sourced, so all we have is a tweet and a YouTube video, but that looks good. Next thing is a post on a React Native subreddit that make us giggle in Software Mention. React Native Reanimated is a library that we built here in Software Mention, and we open source it for all the developers to use for free. And all of the developers, well, not all of them, but many developers ask when will be the stable release of React Native Reanimated, because the next release will consist of something called layout animations. That's a great feature. And the answer for that is soon. We don't have estimates for that, but the beta release will be probably this month. But the stable release, no one knows. Maybe before Christmas, maybe after Christmas. Yeah. We built here in Software Mention 3 libraries. The one that I've mentioned before, Reanimated, Gesture Handler, and also React Native Screens. That's a library that I personally develop with help of, well, many people. With Wojtek Lewicki, with Krzysztof Magiera, and with Jakub Tkacz, but they are not here, except for Krzyś. And we are very proud to announce, well, a huge milestone for us was shared transition progress, and that was something that I wanted to show you. Yeah, and not a... Okay, never mind. There's a guy called Matteo that created a monorepo setup with all of the platforms that React Native use. And with the most basic ones like Android and iOS, but there are also web, Windows, macOS, Electron, and a browser extension. I don't know why, but you could use it, and that's a thing. And the last but not least, there is a blog post, very interesting blog post from React Native core development team. It's about how they are confident that React Native Windows is cool, and they partnered with Microsoft to support that. And they also use React Native for virtual reality user interfaces. Yeah, but one of the quotes from that stuck with me very much. One of the best outcomes of cross-platforms frameworks is how they bring together engineers with vastly different domain expertise. And if you think about it, it's very, very true. For example, React for web, the declarative approach currently is used in Flutter, in Swift UI, in Jetpack Compose, so that's a very true statement. And this is everything that I have. Let's welcome with applause maybe the next person, the next people who will present, Bartek and Łukasz.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bartek. Thank you for the later clarification. I'm not Piotr, I'm Bartek, and here's Łukasz. And we are here talking to you or sharing with you some great things coming from Expo. We call it Modern Expo, and more specifically, how Expo supports custom native code. So let's dive into it, shall we? Okay, the very first question we need to have an answer for is what exactly Expo is. We all are probably pretty aware that Expo lives in the React Native world, and it's some kind of platform, maybe libraries. So yeah, all of this is true. But Expo is like a set of a number of elements. A list of these are here. Let's go one by one through them. So Expo Go, everybody knows Expo Go is the easiest way to dive into React Native world. It's this mobile application that you can install on your mobile phone and launch any Expo compatible React Native project inside it. You can also share your project with your colleagues using QR code, and that's the pretty awesome feature. Another thing is Expo SDK. React Native projects consists actually of two parts, two layers. The JS part, let's call it JS application, and the native runtime, when you need to provide this actual runtime for your JavaScript application. So Expo SDK is like a native runtime, a fixed native runtime consisting of dozens of Expo libraries and some trusted third-party ones. And several of Expo SDKs are always included in Expo Go. Next thing is Snack. It's like web-based editor specifically tailored for React Native projects. And Snacks also support a variety of Expo SDKs that are currently supported by Expo Go application. Another thing is Expo CLI. It's like command line tools for talking with your Expo project or talking with our Expo Cloud services. Our Expo Cloud services, consisting of build, updates, push notifications, we will refer to them as the classic ones, and they do just as the names states. The next generation of these cloud services are called EAS. It stands for Expo Application Services. We are creating, or even created already, a few of them. It's EAS build, submit, update. I will talk about them later. And the last thing is custom development client. It's like Expo Go packed into a library. And Łukasz will be telling you more later on. Okay, so we should be aware of what Expo actually is right now. So what about React Native project? Generally speaking, if you are working with React Native, you try to deliver an application. So you need to follow more or less these phases to achieve your goal. You need to initialize your project using some template, some command line tool. You need to implement your idea, and here is the tricky part. You need to add libraries. You need to add JS-only libraries, and there's no problem with that, but you also have sometimes to add native libraries that add some fancy features to your application, like camera support or maps or whatever else comes to your mind. Next, you need to build an application. That's the tough one. Because we are React Native developers, hey, we write in JS or TypeScript. But here in this phase, we need to deal with the native tooling. Android Studio, Xcode, their problems, a lot of problems sometimes. This phase is really, really error prone. Next one is testing. Everybody do some manual testing while developing application, but it's good to present our application to colleagues. Okay, thank you, Jarek. To be sure that our application actually works. Next phase is submitting to the stores, App Store, Google Play Store. Here you need to deal with the policies of these stores. That could be problematic as well. And when you are after this step, you just need to click release button, and your application is out there into the wild looking for users. Okay, so how Expo can support some of these phases, maybe all of them? I see it this way. There are two groups that we can distinguish here. First one, implement build test. With the assistance of Expo Go, you can go through them with ease, generally speaking. Implementing building testing, it narrows down to using Expo Go application, writing some JS code, actual application, and then sharing it using QR code. Pretty easy, pretty awesome. Sometimes Expo Go limits you, so you need to go with custom development client. But Łukasz will tell you more about it later. Another group of steps that you might want to somehow automate using Expo ecosystem are build, test, submit. You can use some of our commands or our cloud services to do so. Let's dive into some of these. Expo Go. Who is not familiar with this application? Because okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, Expo Go is this, as I said, fancy mobile application. You download it on your phone, and you are able to run some subset of React Native projects. To name them, these are managed workflow Expo projects. These are projects that are compatible with Expo SDKs that are included, these native runtimes, into the Expo Go application. And these steps are covered, as I said, because you just focus on your JS layer, JS application, and all other steps are covered. Pretty easy, pretty awesome. But that might be limiting, as I said previously. But we have a solution for that. And that solution might be Expo run command. It's pretty new command that allows you to build React Native, any React Native project using Expo tooling. And this project can contain any React Native library that includes or not native code. Expo run takes advantage of so-called config plugins. Config plugins are small chunks of code that are served by the libraries, and these describe how this specific library should be natively configured in your native runtime, native project, both iOS and Android. And Expo run regenerates actually every time it is run the iOS and Android directories in your project. So by this way, Expo lifts up the burden of touching the native code by the developer by simply automating it as much as possible. Of course, you need to provide some configuration to some libraries like credentials, keys, API keys, and so on, etc. Another thing that Expo Run is awesome in, it's like drop-in replacement for React Native Run command, but better. I mean, a few things are handled better, how the final application is being run on device, or how the logs are presented. So keep in mind that that's the biggest point here. Expo Run allows you to add arbitrary React Native library to your application, but you don't need to actually touch native runtime at all. And that's something that Expo is striving for. Okay, so what we've got next? Oop, not working, working. This Expo Run command can actually be performed or launched in the cloud. So you can use our EAS build service to build any React Native project in cloud. So you don't really need to have or obtain a MacBook or have installed any Android-related tooling or iOS-related tooling on your computer. You can use our cloud services to perform actual dirty building work. You just focus on JS side. That's awesome. And we also support this fancy mechanism of distributing freshly built application to your test team via a link. Each build ends up with some link. You provide it to your testing team. They just download the freshly built application and they can test it. Wonderful, isn't it? Another EAS service is EAS Submit. Submit could be like it's this boring step when you need to drag and drop your binary into the websites for each of the store. EAS Submit can simplify it, and if configured properly, it just ends up with one command line command. Once properly configured, you can reuse it every time. And the last part from my side is, okay, we went through all the phases. We are on the brink of releasing. We released the application, pretty awesome. Everybody is happy, but wait, we want to add something more. We want to update our application. And okay, so we go back again to the implementation phase, and we wonder, do we want to just affect the JS part of our application, or do we have to or want to affect our native runtime? Depending on decision, we've got two paths to follow. JS-only update is pretty straightforward. We create an updated version of our application, and we are using Expo publish classic command. The newly bundled JS application is uploaded to the Expo servers, and once any user opens their app, this newly created JS bundle is downloaded, and the user is presented with the new application. The whole process is called over-the-air update. Or you will be able to use EAS update, but this service is still a work in progress and will be available later. Alternatively, you need to affect native runtime. And here you fall back to Expo Run command locally to rebuild the whole native layer of your project without touching native layer of your project manually. Or you use pre-configured EAS build and EAS submit that you've already prepared, right? And it's simply as that. So Expo, by providing all this tooling and ecosystem, tries to narrow the gap between these JS-only updates and updates where you need to go through the store cycle once again. Everything possibly will end up with yarn npm expo install package name, expo start to develop, and then you just publish or rebuild your application. That's it. Now I pass the mic to the Łukasz. He will tell you more about custom development client.
Thank you. You have that slide. Yes. So.
No,
it's your turn.
the other button.
Oh, sorry. 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 Ah, okay. Let's work. Okay. So everything that Bartek said is great and awesome. You can right now add.
You need to stand here because camera is there.
You can add right now custom native code into your Expo project. However, as you probably guessed or knew, you cannot use Expo Go anymore in that case. If your app uses a native library, which wasn't included in Expo Go runtime, it won't work. The app will crash or produce you an exception. So I want to introduce a solution to that problem. I want to present a custom development client. I will also answer a few of common questions, like where development client shines, what can I do with custom client, how to start, and if I can use my custom client in my project right now. So let's start that part of the presentation. People love using Expo Go because it gives them a simple way of iterating and working with their JavaScript code. Okay, but we cannot add every native module into Expo Go runtime. So we needed a better solution. We had to give developers a freedom and simplicity known from Expo Go. So we created a custom development client, which will help you with your JavaScript code. At the end, it will help you in those 3 phases of the development pipeline. So development client shines in the implementation, build, and test phase. It's worth mentioning here that development client is basically a replacement for Expo Go in the old managed workflow. It provides you a custom runtime, React Native runtime, where you can just focus on your JavaScript code. And development client only lives in the debug mode of your application. It will be stripped from the release builds. So what does it mean, you can ask? It means that if you want to submit or release your application, you don't have to worry about this package. Basically, the developer client will be removed from the production environment. So the production app size won't change, but you will get a better development experience. So if you ask me, it's a win-win situation. Okay, but what can I do with custom development client? How I said, it is a replacement for Expo Go. Therefore, it has almost all the features known from Expo Go. You will continue deploying your app using Expo CLI and starting it by scanning a QR code or select it from the list of recent active projects. Also, you can run projects hosted by the SNAC, the Expo Online Editor. And since the custom client is tailor-made just for your project, you can fully customize it, everything will behave and work identically to the release build of your application. And here you can see the custom client UI. And I think you can spot some features right away. For example, we have the recent in development section where you can find active projects. So basically, if you run Expo Start in the terminal, the app will show there. So you can just click it. Under that, you have opened projects. It's basically a history of your projects, which were open in that instance of development client. You can also enter a URL of your local bundler manually. However, the easiest way to do it is just by opening a camera app on your phone and scanning a QR code which was generated by Expo Start. On top of that, you will get develop React debug menu upgrade for free. The new menu makes all the features and tools just a key press away from you. You will be able to create a custom extensions. For example, you can create a button or even a screen which will live in the dev menu UI, which can do some work for you. Let's say, for example, you want to create an extension which clears your shared preference storage or switches to production API rather than using mocked one. And you can totally do it with our extension API. However, right now, you need to use native code, native languages to achieve that. So you need to touch Objective-C or Java to create such an extension. However, we plan in the future to move the extension API to JavaScript Word, so it will be easier, I think, in the future. OK, and here you can see the dev menu UI. On top of that, you have some information about your application, like the JavaScript engine, host, and version. Under that, you have some tools known from React Native menu. And under that, you have like the profile screen and settings. OK, now I will show you how to start with the custom client. I will be using the manage project. It means we will be using a project that was meant to be run in Expo Go. However, right now we can use it with custom client without any problems. I will show you how easily you can start your journey with development client. You are just like 3 comments away. So firstly, we need to initialize our project. To do it, you can simply run expo init command and selecting manage project. It will generate you basically a project with some JavaScript and config files. You can find like basic stuff like node modules directory and packet.json, pretty basic. But what is important here, that that directory doesn't contain any native code. Everything will be generated by our tooling and set up via config plugins. So you don't have to worry about touching the native stuff. Then you need to add expo dev client as a dependency. That package contains all the native and JavaScript code, and also the config plugin, which powers the development client. To do it, you can simply run expo add command. That command will modify your packet.json and will install the npm package into your node modules directory. And in terms of the installation, that's all. The final step is to build and run your project. The simpler way of doing that is by running expo run command. You can always also use the EAS build service. However, today I will be using the expo run command. After a couple of minutes, your app will be ready, and you can just focus on your JavaScript code. But remember, if you want to add a native library, or library which contains a native code, native implementation, you need to rebuild your application, your native application. You need to again run expo run, for example, or use the cloud service. But if you just want to add a pure JavaScript library, you can do it. It should work without any problems. OK, I prepare a simple pre-recorded demo, and I will show you. So let's see it in action. OK. Wait a second. So, firstly, we need to initialize our project. I selected a blank manage template. Then you can go to that directory and just add export dev client package. After that, we need to wait a little bit. After that, you can build and run your project. After the compilation finish, you will be directly linked into your project. The dev client UI will be omitted in that case. And the debug menu will say hello to you. You can close it and just start working on the application. For example, we can change the text and make it a little bit bigger. Then we can bring up the menu and reload and maybe show the performance monitor. And after that, we can go back to the launcher. So we basically bring the functionality of Expo Go into package, which you can install in any project, in any React Native project. It's currently working without uni modules. You can use it in bare React projects. And the final question: can I use development client in my project right now? The answer is simple and short. Yes, you can. Everything the code is on the GitHub. You can view it. It's open source. If you are using Expo CLI, Android Studio, or Xcode to build your application, you can do it. Everything is free. However, if you want to use the EAS build service to build your application, you have to have an Expo Premium account, because it's in the preview phase, but when the phase ends, we'll provide you a free tier, so we will be able to check those features for free without paying a single penny in the future.
Okay, so I believe that's it from our end. And I believe we have some minutes spared from the questions, possible questions. Are there any questions out there regarding our presentation? Remember, you can always catch up later on somewhere in the office or other software mentioned folks. There are other Expo team members here, sitting there and there. So please be welcomed and join us later on if you want to talk about this stuff. But are there any questions right now? If no, we will probably give the floor to Kacper. Okay, so thank you. Yep. Okay. Please wait for the microphone. Oh, is it turned on?
It should work.
Okay, hi.
Okay.
It's Lucas. So the question is, can I add basically any native library to the Expo client, to the custom Expo client, or does it have to come with this plugin configuration thingy?
It has to have the configuration plugin. Right. We try to add the config plugin into every popular modules right now,
right.
But you can do it yourself if you want.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Basically speaking, these config plugins are short JS files consisting of 30 lines of code, most often generally, and most library authors are caring right now to add the config plugins to their libraries, just to support this flow, because it's super easy then.
And in the custom client, you can basically eject and get the full project, and then you can do your setup. But you need to do it manually.
Any other questions out there? If no, thank you once again.
Thank you.
And I believe the next speaker is coming.
Thank you, Bartek and Łukasz, for this great presentation. We'd like to welcome the Piotr that will hopefully tell us something about monorepos in React Native. And he is getting prepared, so I'm trying to just say something. But yeah, the quiet is okay, I guess. Let's welcome Peter with a great applause.
Hey everybody, my name is Peter, and just give me a sec. Where to start? Maybe let's start with who I am. I work close to South Mansion House, in the next building, in the same floor, at Miquido, and I'm React Native dev here, also a front-end tech lead. And today I would like to talk you the story about how we at Miquido uses the Monorepository and how we see the code sharing with React Native. The goals of this presentation are three. The first one is I would like to encourage you that this is the current thing, that sharing the code with React Native has big business value. The second goal is to show you what benefits it can bring to your businesses, to your projects, and to your companies. And the third goal is I would like to show you how to do it in an efficient way, or at least how we used to do it in an efficient way at Miquido. So those are the three main goals of my presentation. So let's proceed. And I would like to draw the starting point for the discussion. And the key is the last year, as for many things. The last year brought a lot of changes to our lives, and it brought a huge change in the way I see the software development. How it happened. March last year, there were a lot of unknowns around us, and that was the same story at Miquido. So we moved some of the people from the dev team to support the sales process, and that was among those people who were involved in the sales process. And this brought to me a lot of observations, and the first one is the biggest one, but my observation is not enough. I thought it would be much better to talk with the data. So I collected the data about the leads at Miquido. The leads are the initial contacts from our clients, from our potential clients. And the first bar represents the total amount of leads from the March last year to the September this year. That's the period I'm involved in the sales process of Miquido. And moving forward, that's the another bar. This represents the mobile apps, the questions around the mobile apps, and basically Miquido is mobile-oriented software house, so the mobile is core of our offer. 78 is a nice result, so 78 leads are connected with building something that will work on mobile device. Another bar represents the web. 67 leads that we have are connected with building something that will work in a browser. So as you can see, the mobile is bigger at Miquido. But after a few months of working in the sales team, I realized that there is a huge portion of projects that contains both the mobile and web apps. And those apps shares a lot of same things, like the business logic or the UI or some kind of, I don't know, utils, that we don't need to code twice on the mobile and on the web. So we discovered that there is around the 44 projects that we can somehow reduce the complexity by sharing some code between the mobile and web. Just to add some another numbers, maybe that's the information. What are the web apps that don't share the code with the mobile? Basically, those are the admin panels and landing pages and payment gateways. Less important numbers, but still interesting, are around the desktop and TV apps leads at Miquido. As you can see, it's only a 6%. That's not so high number. But what is interesting that in all cases that we had in Miquido during the last year, all the desktop and TV leads share the same logic with the mobile. So they were side clients to the mobile solution. So we realized that there is a thing, there is a story in sharing the code between the mobile and the web and maybe other platforms. And another observation I get during the working in sales team is that at some point in every project, there will be question about if we can make it cheaper or faster. And that brings a value to the business to be able to do something cheaper and faster, but without the, losing the quality, losing the ability to, maintain the app for years. So that was second on my observation. And we decided that, hey, we have to do something with it. So we decided that we will involve our React and React Native developers and force them to work together with the shared code bases and try to curve our path, how we can do the shared code bases, the monorepositories with the React and React Native. How it impacted our business. So first of all, we were able to take the wider projects, the projects that contain both mobile, web, and even desktop apps. It reduced budgets and made us more interesting on the market. And on the other hand, the side impact was that at some point we will release the app, and our clients will need to take the app on its own. And it's much easier to engage only the JavaScript developer, only the React developers, than trying to find separate teams for the Android, Flutter, React, etc. So that was a huge value for our clients. But when it comes to the impact on the team, there is also a nice value. As working in a larger teams brings a satisfaction, there is nothing worse than working alone or in the two-person project. So we were able to organize the projects for 6+ developers, which was something really new at our company. And also the sharing knowledge, working on the same code, brought a opportunity to share the knowledge around the platforms between the developers. The React developers had a chance to take a look at React Native code, and the React Native developers had a chance to update the knowledge around the web. And there is also a nice story about the competition with Flutter. At Miquido, we have equal teams of Flutter and React Native. And I observed while working in a sales team that the Google made a huge job promoting the Flutter, and mostly clients came to us if they are decided for the cross-platform, are decided to the Flutter, are tended to the Flutter. It was hard to encourage them to take a step back and consider React Native. As you can see, I checked the data, and initially 3 out of 5 potential Miquido cross-platform clients wanted initially to use Flutter. But we realized that in the 2021, the biggest argument for the React Native is ability to share the code base between the web and the mobile. So that made us possible to still maintain the equal status in our company between Flutter and React Native. And currently, we develop the same amount of React Native projects and the Flutter projects. So before I start to describe what is our way of handling the monorepository and sharing the code, what is the real state of React Native for platforms? We had to make some investigation because we wanted to know whether we would like to go with the React Native for web or clean React Native, whether we would like to use the React Native for macOS and the Windows. So we engaged the team to check the business value of those frameworks. And when it comes to the React Native for web, we were pretty satisfied and quite encouraged by the quality and how reliable and mature this framework is. Basically, the React Native for Web is a translation layer between all the APIs on all the components of React Native to the web. So I don't know, camera API becomes web camera API, and we were kind of satisfied that it translates almost all React Native components and API to the web environment. So that was the first positive thing that we came across. When it comes to the React Native for Windows, we soon realized that the React Native for Windows is more mature brother of React Native for macOS, but still many packages are not adapted to the native platforms, both Windows and the macOS. Things are much better when it comes to the React Native for web. But surprisingly, our experience was quite good as well. Honestly, I expected that this is still a mess. However, we were able to do some POCs, and we are satisfied with the quality. When it comes to the macOS, as I said, it seems to be a few steps behind the React Native for Windows. And personally, I think that this announcement of Apple that they will allow iOS apps to run on Mac somehow made that project to start looking pointless. But maybe that's only my opinion. So after playing with all those frameworks, we had to make a choice how the perfect stack of frameworks that would share the same code will look at Miquido. So there were two main questions. The first one was around the web, whether we would like to go with the React or React Native for web. And another one was around the desktop, whether we stick with Electron, which we have experience, or we would go with the React Native for web and for macOS. And we realized that in a commercial work, it's still much better to go with the simple solutions. So we initially go with the React to, don't have another layer of abstraction and to have more control around the code. And also when it comes to the desktop, we realized that there are some features that we won't be able to do with the React Native for Windows, and we were not able to encourage our clients to take a risk going with those frameworks. Recently, the state has just changed, and we are more interested in Chrome desktop apps, but this is just because our desktop apps are only the side apps. Those are not the main apps, just the side clients. Chrome desktop apps are basically the installable PWAs, and the only one drawback is that client have to run the Chrome. But when it comes to the experience, it's pretty the same as the app with the Electron. It has the same problems, but it has the same benefits. So I described it briefly, but why we choose React Native plus React? Because of this less abstraction. We had a problem with COs using the React Native for web. However, I know that this could be done much better, and recently we even tried to merge the React Native with Next.js. But still, we believe that React Native for web is POC friendly, and we used to use it when we try to build something fast and simple for mobile and the web. As I said, when it comes to the React Native for Windows and macOS, we were quite disappointed with many of the packages are not adapted to the native platforms, and using Electron or Chrome desktop apps, we have chance to use many of the web-based apps. We struggled sometimes with builds. It happened with the Windows that sometimes the new version of packages has no compiled version of files inside, and our build failed for a couple of days. And the biggest benefit of using those frameworks, that is outstanding performance and reduced app size, was not a key value for us in our commercial work. I would like to underline that there is one success story for React Native for web that I'm pretty amazed. It's at Twitter. The Twitter partially, nobody knows how deeply, relies on the React Native for web. And we try to analyze why Twitter succeeded. And we feel that the Twitter succeeded because this is not the most complex app. I mean, there are no gestures, no animations, the navigation is pretty easy. So probably for that kind of a project, even if Twitter is quite a huge app, that could work, and definitely we will try to use React Native for web in the future, maybe with the projects where we have comfort of budget. So our final decision was to go with the React plus React Native plus React, Web React with Chrome desktop apps. That's the current state at Miquido that we use for the projects with shared code base. Okay, moving forward, we have to make some rules. What can be shared and what shouldn't be shared in any case. So I will try to tell you what are our opinions. Those are only our opinions, and I know that probably many of you will have another one. But let's start with the UI, and the UI is interesting because as the developers, we have a tendency to be delighted with code. If we write the component that will, work perfectly on the mobile, on the web, on the desktop, we are pretty amazed. We are shaking heads with being convinced that this is a good job. But I have a bad news for you. We are alone in this. The other people doesn't see that beauty of the code. They want to have a perfect UX and UI. So those are the comments from the managers, from the product owners, from the designers, and the most important, from the client. Sometimes the great-looking component or view on the mobile, which simply won't work or will look empty on the desktop. And sometimes it's even a difference between the web app running in the mobile browser and native mobile apps, for example, with bottom bar, which looks quite naturally in the mobile app and which doesn't in the web that is run in the mobile browser. And I think that the React Native team realized it, and realized it a long time ago. That's the blog post of Sophie from 2015, when she said that they don't chase the sentence that write once, run anywhere. They prefer to say that learn once, write anywhere, and I totally agree with that. But in some cases, we can share some part of UIs. Definitely, something that can be shared are I don't know if you are familiar with this design system strategy and design system terms. Those most simple things like the typography, like the colors, dimensions, etc. Those are the things that under some circumstances, when the UIs are close, can be shared and should be shared. Simple components are much more tricky, but still the inputs, buttons, bars, etc. can be shared, but they have to be shared carefully. When it comes to a more complex UI, like complex UI components or even views, I believe, and my past experience says, that this is something that should stay separate for platform, because I believe that the platforms are different, and we are here to make a good user experience, and all of those platforms deserve tailored user experience. that fits the environment. Moving forward, we have another area of logic, and starting with the business logic, which sometimes could be quite heavy. That's the symptom that something could be shared. If we see that the business logic is shared between the mobile and the web, then there should be an alarm in our head that this could be a good candidate for shared code repository. And the business logic, shared business logic, brings the biggest savings. I'm pretty sure about this. That's the part that influences the budget of the apps. All the things like the stores, context, whatever you use, is something that can be shared if the mobile and the web serves the same logic. And we produced a strategy that every project we start with the meeting of every developer involved in the project, both from the mobile, web, desktop, and we try to design the state, global state or local states and context for business logic. And we try to meet the requirements of every platform with this design. Other utils like the formatting methods, minor helpers, those are something that can be shared as well. Those are good candidates to be shared between the platforms. And I used to say that if something is a rule on the web, should be a rule on the mobile as well. So there is no reason why, when it comes to business logic, something should work differently on the mobile and the web. It could be when it comes to the UI, but when it comes to the logic, that could be quite confusing if something is working different between the platforms. Moving forward, we have the communication, and this is also the area when we can share the logic. API description, authentication, all the requests and responses shouldn't be different between the platforms. And exactly the same request as I wrote should be made on each of them if they share the same business logic. When it comes to external integrations, that's something that can be shared, but it has to be done carefully. We had the situation with the Stripe that we developed the mobile app using the Stripe Web SDK a few years back, and then we realized that in some countries the 3D secure system is available. So and this SDK uses the native web APIs to display the input to enter the code from the SMS, and that's blow up our app, and we missed it during the tests. So it has every package that we use and we want to share between the platforms need to be checked and verified whether it doesn't rely on the native APIs. And when it comes to the communication with API, if any source is reliable source for the web, should be reliable for mobile as well. There should be any difference between the platforms when it comes to communication with data source. The last one is widely understood configuration. So we used to provide the config files in the shared part of our applications, but we extend those config files in our directories, platform-specific directories. So, for example, we have main shared config file containing, I don't know, the API URL. But when we want to introduce something what is web-specific, then we just put it in the web-specific config file. When it comes to the internationalization, the languages, we realized that this is also a nice thing to share between the platforms. And we had that situation that at some point client changed the month plan into the subscription. And it was done, but it was done only on the mobile, and there was a confusion that web app said something, called it differently than the mobile. So if you use the internationalization file as a shared, there is only one source of true, and any change will affect every platform, which is good for the user experience and doesn't bring the confusion that something is named differently on another platform. So I used to say that if something is connected with render, then probably we should to leave it in the platform specific directory, except those, as I said, simple UIs, the core UI things. But when it's not connected with the render, with the UI, then at least you should consider it as a shared between the platform. So summing up, what can be shared and what we share in our projects. As I said, those are API calls, the API descriptions, assets. However, the assets usually are extended with the platform-specific code base. Config constants, the same. Hooks, stores, typography, typings when we use TypeScript, and the last but not least, the business logic. What platform-specific directory serves are mostly the views, the UI, and sometimes when there is need, they extend what is served by the shared directory. We used to start with doing the components and the app parts inside the platform-specific directories, but once we realized that something is useful or is necessary on the other platforms, we somehow promote it to the shared directory. That's the strategy we used to follow heavily recently. And last but not least, how much can be shared? So those are the stats that I checked yesterday, and those are the numbers from the two recent projects of Miquido. The first one is the project that contains the mobile web and kind stupid macOS app, and then we were able to share 28% of the code. And another project is slightly different, because that's the project for food order. Food order, and then we have the two mobile apps for Android and iOS, and the kiosk app for Android device that is located in the restaurants. And then we were able to share quite a lot of code, because in that case the UI was transferable between the kiosk device and the mobile devices. The another question we had was whether we would like to go with monorepository or many repositories. I'm pretty sure that all of you are familiar with those concepts, but we tried to apply both of them, and we checked which one would work better in our commercial work. And we decided to pick monorepository because it's much easier to synchronize everything. There is a single place of truth, single source of truth. But my favorite value of using monorepository is the last one, is a perfect chance to share the skills in the team and to share the perspectives between the developers of web and the mobile. And after some projects, as an input for the projects, we have a skillful React developers and skillful React Native developers. But after some projects, we have skillful developers that can switch between the React Native and React. That's a huge value for organization. When pick many repositories, I don't know. Probably the first one is the most important. If you doesn't trust to your developers and you want to to restrict the access to the certain code for certain developers, then probably it would be much easier for with the many repositories. And if you are concerned that you are maybe don't have the skill set to configure the build, then probably going with many repositories is much easier than trying to prepare the build on a shared code base. Those are examples from one of the projects that we work on, and as you can see on the left side, I opened the shared directory, and there are all those things that I mentioned before. The config constants, some things connected with the logic, like the stores or hooks, utils, and some basic UI. But on the right side, you can see that the directory of mobile contains less directories than the shared directory. And as you can see in this case, the project contains one shared directory, not for one app, but for two apps. The first one is called Live, and it has 3 versions: mobile, TV, and web. And the another is called XP, and it contains same mobile, TV, and the web. But both of them uses the one shared directory. The thing that helped us a lot is the Yarn workspaces. This is something that changed our lives, and actually it made it possible to use the to share the code. As you can see, the typical project structure contains the packages directory, which contains all the projects and contains the shared directory. And on the right side, you can see how easily we can import the certain things from the shared directory to project directories, to projects. Some of the packages that are common between the projects, the packages are gathered in the Node modules, in the root directory. Docs can be collected here, and the scripts mostly connected with the CI and CD are placed in the root directory. But there were also traps with using the code, that is shared among the few projects. Some of them, probably you know the sentence that sharing is caring, and I used to say recently that sharing needs caring, because I realized that using the shared code base, the end-to-end testing is necessary. We can do it with only manual testing. And that's a real case on the right side when developer did a typo on the mobile. And on the mobile, that was actually the part of the code from the shared directory. And on the mobile, it was overwritten by the animation, but on the web, it wasn't. So randomly, out of nowhere, this container disappeared on the web, and we had no idea what changed, because at this point we didn't do any development works on the web. So this is something that we can't cover with manual testing. The end-to-end testing is necessary for the projects when we have shared code base. Build complexity, that's something that is brought with the one repository that contains many projects, as I said before. And it's even more complicated when we want to build both for the Windows and the macOS desktop apps. CO issues, that's something that's a problem we met when we tried to use the React Native for web. And it's not like it's not impossible. It just needs to to do more work than we need to do actually. And as I mentioned, external packages and integrations are shared between the platforms are tricky. And there is always this temptation to unify. If this shared directory exists, there is always a temptation that, hey, maybe we will move that component to the shared directory and it will look the same on the mobile and the web. But sometimes it can lead to loss of usability, but also it makes the further maintaining of the app much harder than it was before. So summing up, those were my observations from the last year. Since last year, we tried to use the monorepositories at Miquido on a large scale. Actually, many of our projects uses a shared code, and that's the very first time. We use it only with the React and React Native. I know that some other languages also supports the sharing code, that there is opportunity to share the code. I believe that the sharing the code brings a huge value for the organizations, both from the business side but also from the team side. And in our case, it was monorepositories plus Yarn workspaces that made it possible. And in our case, we made a safe move with going with React Native and React, but the other options are possible. However, it can influence your budget goals. And in our case, in the commercial work, sometimes that's the thing that matters, and we can't use the fancy technology here. Yeah, so that's all from my side, at least. And here I left some space for the questions, if you have some. I see one hand.
Hi, so a great talk, by the way. I have a question regarding the case where you mentioned developing an app for a desktop.
Mm-hmm.
So not so long ago, there was a conference announcing Flutter 2.0, where they mentioned a lot of things supporting the desktop, both for Windows, macOS, and Linux. And did you consider using Flutter both for the mobile app and the desktop app in the future instead of the React Native? Because when you were talking about support for desktop, you mentioned that React Native for macOS is not so great, and Flutter's main goal is to unify all the platforms together. So are you looking into using Flutter more for other platforms than mobile, or how it looks in your company?
Mm-hmm. As I said, we have a Flutter team, and Miquido is a Google partner agency, so we have pretty skillful Flutter developers, and they did some projects using the Flutter for web. Actually, there were 3 of them, and the results are pretty satisfying, except this is not the quality of the web that React Native can serve. I mean, I don't know if you are familiar with the problems of Flutter for web.
Yeah, so basically you have one canvas with no CEO. As you mentioned, you have problem with React Native, and with, I guess, with Flutter it's even worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. To be specific, those are not one canvas, but few canvases. But you can't, for example, select the text and copy. The SEO suffers a lot, and accessibility is not the best when it comes to the Flutter for web. I don't know. I heard about the Flutter for desktop, that they announced it. I don't know what are the plans. Probably it. I know as far as I know the Flutter specific, it could work because of the Flutter way of implementation. However, I don't know if, it's always a business. If we will have a client that wants to develop the desktop, they will probably try to stick with something that is reliable and it was tested before. So probably the Electron or React Native for desktop will be his first choice, and the Flutter for desktop can be only used as the POC, internal POC in our company. I don't think that we have plans to use it. However, when it comes to the Flutter for web, I can tell you that one of the apps was the player, Spotify-like player, that ran both in the mobile and the web, and the client was pretty satisfied and amazed with the result. But that's the type of the app that doesn't suffer with the CO case and with the accessibility case as much as some others.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, thanks. The presentation was really good. I wanted to ask whether you tried, for example, to divide the implementation of the, let's say, React components in such a way that you have two types of components. The one which do the functionality, so the purely business logic, and at the end they basically are only used to return the view component, which is supplied with all the needed stuff to render. Because I want to tell you that that's the approach which we went with. And like, unfortunately, I do not have any metrics and this kind of stuff, because when it came to the business side of the project, unfortunately, the client left us prior that we could create the React Native app, because we started from the web one. So I wanted whether you considered this kind of approach, and whether your code looked like that, maybe.
Yeah, I think that with such approach, we are, going few steps back to this container and the dummy component strategy that ruled the React world a few years back. And personally, I would. That's not the case that we follow right now. That's not the path that we follow right now. But that could be a good strategy to have those dump view or render-only components shared. Stick with the platform-specific directories, but this logic components that serve the logic to this dump components to be placed only in shared directory. That's a good path, in my opinion. However, I observed that with the growing popularity of hooks, the logic is getting more and more messed up with the presentation layers. I think, however, the hooks are amazing. They brought a mess to the code, particularly when we have an experienced team. But getting back to your question, probably that's a good idea as well to divide the components. So that's it. Thank you for your time, and hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Thank you, Peter, for this amazing detailed presentation. That ends our official part of the meetup. Now it's time for pizza, for networking, and for beer that's in the fridge. So yeah, that's all from us.